It's six rotations. He's Mick, I'm Daniel, and conference play about to begin. Such an excited time here in college volleyball. Welcome into another episode. It's a fun one, again, sponsored by SNA Sports, better equipment for a better game. And Mick, it's been 2 years since we've been able to watch these teams play non-conference action. And I think we've got to start off by tipping our caps to these coaches, because from Stanford going around the country to see Nebraska and Louisville and Kentucky, Louisville, it has been an absolute delight for college volleyball fans.
There's no question that 10 of the teams, I don't know if the coaches got together or what, but they did a phenomenal job. And you know what it does for our sport is highlighted our sport at a time when football has gotten all the attention up until now. These matches have been electric. And I've got my 10 people, the 10 teams that really scheduled tough. I've got them ranked. Stanford got six top-rated teams on their schedule. Minnesota 5, Nebraska 4, Baylor 5, Kentucky 4, Louisville 3, Pitt 3, Florida 4, USD 3, and Texas 4. That is amazing for the first 4 weeks, and we're not even into the fourth week yet. And those guys made volleyball so fun for us out here. I didn't mind watching my 20 matches a weekend.
No, not one bit. And before we jump into the poll, and you'll see that those teams are represented well and really gifted based off of how they scheduled. But before we do that, let's break down our episode today. We're going to shake things up a little bit because Mick and I decided this is such an important week to really break down the poll. It's the last look at what the coaches who vote think before conference play starts. So when you've got that ACC versus SEC team right there, this is the week we really want to dissect it. So we're going to keep it just him and I talking today, but we will tease and possibly give you a little bit of a midweek present that's going to have a little bit more of that around the arena's twist to it. We've got some fun midweek action. I mentioned that there is conference play, but non-conference play is 99% done. We'll talk a little bit about Texas versus Rice coming up midweek in our matches to watch after the poll. But Mick, I think we jump right into it. I think we look at the poll. You sent me your opinion of what the top 5 should be. When you see it, and when you see Texas, Wisconsin, Ohio State, Pittsburgh, Louisville not change at all from last week to this week, despite Louisville going to Lexington, going on that 8-0 run right after we talked to the captain, Tori Dilfer. That had to have been fun for her and all of Louisville Nation. And then sweep at Devaney and yet stay at 5. What was the first thing that jumped out to you?
Well, I just marveled at how much fun it was to see these kids in action and against the competition. You know, I had the same 5 teams in the top 5. I just had them positioned differently. I have Pitt at 3, Louisville at 4, and Ohio State 5. And those people that love Ohio State, I love Ohio State, but they haven't proved anything yet. Their schedule was light this fall. They only had 2 matches that they could really show what they could do. So I'm waiting for them to jump into the conference schedule and see what they do against the Big Ten.
So I mentioned those top 5 stay the same. Ohio State survives a scare against Notre Dame. Pittsburgh really front-loaded their schedule this past weekend. They took a little bit of a break. So they maybe pay for that a bit. That's still a little head-scratching to me, because to me, the Panthers had the toughest of those 3 in terms of schedules, and they sit undefeated. Then you've got Kentucky and Purdue tied at 7. The Wildcats were able to bounce back nicely. It was a freshman show, right? Minor against Grome. It's Grome's birthday today, so that's fun. So happy birthday to Kentucky's freshman. And as we look at that, they were able to squeak through Nebraska. Had Nebraska won that 5-setter, though, on Sunday against Kentucky, do you think they would have jumped into the top 10?
Well, they probably would have really jumped a great amount forward because they were playing a lot of freshmen. And I'm not sure why. I like the way they played. I thought they were great freshmen when they recruited them, and they're certainly going to be good. You just don't know. They didn't win it. That's the important thing. And so I like Kentucky in that second group. I like Baylor, Minnesota, Kentucky, Washington, Stanford. I have Purdue 11th. And again, I like Purdue, but schedule hasn't allowed them to show what they can do, and they got swept by Louisville. And Louisville's good. There's no question. And they got slept at Louisville.
Yeah, then you've got Minnesota 9, Baylor 10. That's going to round out our top 10. I got a fun note from our friend over on Twitter at Cheese Trader saying, here's something to keep an eye on, right? 3 of the top 6 teams this week are within a close drive to Columbus, right? You've got Louisville, you've got Pittsburgh, Kentucky not too far away, and of course, Ohio State in Columbus hosting the Final Four. Don't forget, you can still grab tickets on NCAA.com to get to the Final Four. Make sure that if you get there, you rep your colors. It's going to be wild. Listen, I am in for any of these 10 teams staying competitive, but you mentioned Purdue. I think when you look at the ACC and the Big Ten this season, this ranking is not as important because they're going to go through gauntlets. And it's strange to say, right, Mick? I mean, when's the last time you said that the ACC was going to be a gauntlet in college volleyball? Let's look at our next 10 here because we get a couple more, right? Georgia Tech jumps into the top 20. And is it the conference to beat right now? That's what I want to ask you.
Well, we have to see, but I have to say that Florida State upsetting Florida 3-1. Well, maybe it's not an upset. Florida State took them out, but it's at Florida State.
So we'll call it an upset for now.
That's another ACC win. That's a big deal. Okay, so you've got ACC got what, 2 teams, 3 teams in last year. They could be pushing for 5 teams this year. The past years, Big Ten, Pac-12 have gotten 6 and 7 teams in. They may be coming down to 5 the way the ACC and even the SEC, who only got 2 last year, the SEC has maybe some growing room coming there.
So we'll rank our conferences based off of Mick and my strengths coming up after we break down this top 25. But when you see BYU there, they got some revenge over Utah. Utah fell. Did they fall far enough? Upset by Boise State after defeating Nebraska. Then they play in that holy war, and it was kind of one-sided. BYU took care of business, I believe, in 4. They dropped from 10 to 15. Nebraska goes from 6 to 12. We might need an entire episode to talk about this mini meltdown here for John Cook. But first, let's talk BYU and Utah. Do you think those 2 teams are where they should be here before conference play?
No, I think BYU needs to be about 16th. They have not proved themselves, and that crowd they had behind them, they could have beaten anybody in the world that night. That group was rowdy, and you talk about hard places to play, but that was a good win for BYU. But I think they're right in the middle of the pack. And as they get into playing USD and Pepperdine and LMU, those teams will find out really what BYU is all about. I wish they would have scheduled tougher, but I know they wanted to get this team comfortable first. So, it's always a hard thing to get after the coaches about not scheduling tough enough, but you have to pay, you'll pay for it in the poll, but the poll doesn't cost you anything.
So I got to broadcast that Stanford-Nebraska match, and to see Nebraska at 12, Stanford at 14, based off of the 2 matches that they played this week and the 2 matches that they each played last week is so puzzling to me. You asked, right? You said Stanford is 1 outside hitter away from being in that top tier. And I teased, I said, hey, I've gotten word there's this 6'6" phenom that's just waiting to get on the court. And Sammy Francis made her debut. She led the team in swings against Nebraska. She then played pretty well. I mean, she's obviously working through it, but a lot of Stanford fans are getting excited because the last time they had a 6'6" freshman on the outside, we know what Catherine Plummer did, right?
Yeah, and I'm telling you right now, I have Stanford at 10. It's strictly because of that, because they now can score on both pins at a high level. And the middles are okay, but the pins are good, and that's going to get them in the hunt as far as I'm concerned. So I like them much higher than the coaches like them. I don't know if they didn't watch the games, but I thought those games were great. And the Kentucky game, I mean, Kentucky's for real. They hung in there. Now they were at home, but they played like they were in Hawaii at the old Clum Gym when it was so hot that every play you had to wipe the floor. That's the way it was in Lexington.
That's the way it's been in Lexington since I was over working for Purdue, and they used to take breaks and it was like 97 degrees broadcasting a match. But then you've got to go there in December and it's 45 degrees.
Yeah.
There's no AC. They leave the doors open in the Coliseum.
It is cold in there too, and it is damp cold.
Yeah,
Make sure I get the P on the end of that damp cold. Yes.
They had over 3,500 fans on Sunday, a phenomenal match, but it's just a puzzling one, right? I mean, Nebraska comes out so flat against Louisville. It runs of 8-2, 9-3, and 9-1 from the Cardinals in each set to sweep the Huskers at home. And yet we're going to sit them at 12 while Stanford beats them. I don't want to say handedly on Tuesday, but I was there and there were more Nebraska fans than Stanford fans inside Maples. That's one that's a little puzzling for me. You see Creighton at 16, Florida drops down to 17. They had a couple sweeps over Coastal Carolina, and then Georgia Tech, UCLA, Penn State. Those couple teams have continuously just hovered there, no matter whether they win or lose, Mick.
Yeah, and I think it's because, again, the schedule, there's no place to really pick up and go. I'm really looking forward to the matches coming up, the conference matches for these teams that played it safe in the first 3 weeks. The conference matches will now determine if they're in a conference that has ranked teams, they have a chance to move up. If they're in a conference that doesn't have ranked teams, they're not going to move up on the AVCA poll, but they can win their conference, and that's how they get into the tournament.
So Oregon and Washington both survived major scares this weekend. Harvard was up late against Oregon in the 5th set. Montana State had a massive lead against the Huskies in the 5th set, just to see both Oregon and Washington survive those. San Diego had a roller coaster weekend as we reveal our final 5 here. Tennessee, WKU, Pepperdine, Colorado moves up. They stay undefeated. And then USD, I said they went up with that 5-set win over the Trojans and then back down to earth as the Big West finally got their one marquee win. Hawaii and now USD have both beaten USC as Long Beach State. Hawaii and Long Beach State have now both beaten USC. Colorado beat Colorado State in their first real test. As we take a look at these 25 teams, 1 or 2 missing, in my opinion. What about yours, Mick? Do you have someone that you think should have been in this top 25?
Well, I do. I have South Carolina, and I'm different than a lot of people, but I watched South Carolina early in the year, and they're for real. They have ball control. They have everything but a major terminator. So I like South Carolina in there. I'm okay to watch Marquette. I've been a Marquette fan. I'm interested to see if North Carolina is for real. They are undefeated. I saw Florida State play. But and Ole Miss's big win gives them somebody to look at too a little bit. UNLV is creeping up, and Boise's had a couple of big matches. So you've got some teams that are challenging, and then there's always Rice, who played a really good schedule and got penalized for it. So now it's all about them beating Western Kentucky in their conference, I believe.
So for me, yeah, you mentioned a couple undefeated teams down there. Ole Miss is a head scratcher. They only received 12 votes, 102 shy of getting into the top 25. Caleb Bandsworth has their team electric. They obviously have a big win over WKU, and then Florida State's the other one. If the coaches are going to keep a 4-loss Florida team in the top 20, you've got to respect and congratulate a team that went and took care of business against them at home. Florida State's only losses are against 2 tournament teams from the past few years in Michigan and UCF. They're the only team that's beaten Florida Gulf Coast twice. I like Florida State. Yeah, Marquette's the one that's just on the bubble there. When we talk about undefeated teams, we can kind of go into a few of our segments here and our poll of the weekend. Most surprising undefeated team. We've got Ole Miss, Colorado, UNC, and Maryland. Maryland is a team that I think shocks me the most. It just fell shy of Ole Miss by a couple percentage points. The Rebels won the vote there. What did you think based off of those teams? Maybe Colorado is maybe a team that, not surprising too many people, they get to go through a gauntlet in the Pac-12.
I'm not a big fan of Colorado or Maryland just yet until they start playing some teams that are a little bit higher caliber. I think they did a nice job with the schedule, the way they set it up. They got the wins, but I haven't seen it yet. Colorado's got a good challenge coming this week. Maryland, I don't remember who Maryland's playing in the first round, the Big Ten, but they'll find out we'll find out real quick if they're for real. The other two I like.
Yeah, Maryland, and this is Ed Strong gave his opinion here. Of course, he works for Volleyball Magazine, great reporter and great ambassador for the sport. He said Ole Miss by miles, the best win of the group, and they went 1-19 last year. He said Maryland's 12 wins are empty calories. I love that comment from Ed. Their best win is against Virginia. So yeah, we get a real test of what Maryland can bring. How about this? Versus Wisconsin at Minnesota this weekend. There's the test. I mean, right off the bat, we get to find out if I'll say it right now. If they are undefeated after this coming weekend and not in the top 15, we're gonna have a big headlining banner off the top of our show next week saying, "Get Maryland some respect," because that would be an unbelievable opening weekend for conference play. They call it the 10-week war for a reason. We've got our upset of the weekend, and this was unanimous. Boise State knocking off their first ever top 10 opponent on Monday night, upsetting Utah at home. They are off to their best start in school history. And Mick, are you ready for the stat of the weekend before we go over a few other fun ones? This is the stat of the weekend. Crazy. Courtesy of Caleb Henry up in Nebraska. The last time that Nebraska lost 3 straight non-conference regular season games. Okay. So 3 straight regular season games out of the Big Ten. Can you give me a guess? Even just an era, a decade.
It would have to be before Terry Pettit, the way he's scheduled.
1991. 1991. There is not a soul playing college volleyball right now that was alive the last time Nebraska went 0-3 in 3 straight non-conference games. Of course, now they've done it against 3 top 10, top 15 teams, but that was UCLA, BYU, and New Mexico. That stat blew me away. Thought it was a great one. I love little fun tidbits like that. And as we continue going here, I want to hear your rankings. Let's get into our ranking the conferences. It's probably going to start with the Power 5, but maybe not, right? WCC gets a little love here. Mick, get your notes together. Let's crank in here a little bit of rapid fire. Is it still the Big Ten and the Pac-12 and everyone else? Because I think that's the big question, right?
Well, that is a big question. And what you have to look at in the conferences is if you took the Big 12 and took just their top 2 teams, they're going to be right up there with anybody else playing right now. The rest of the conference, so they're going to die playing the rest of the conference because the rest of the conference is not to their level. Same thing when the ACC, while the ACC may have 4 teams, maybe 5 that are really good, they also have 13 teams in that conference. So they got to play 8 teams now, up and down, up and down, up and down, maybe. So I don't know if that helps them. The Big Ten has only got 6 right now. Boy, the bottom end of the Big Ten has fallen out big time. And the Pac-12 actually is better throughout the conference than the Big Ten is. So that's pretty interesting. And we still don't know about the SEC. The SEC looks like it's still a 2-team conference, but South Carolina, I thought we'd see, Arkansas, we thought we'd see some of these teams really start challenging, but not yet. And you've got, like you said, Ole Miss coming along. We have to find out if they're for real. So that's still only a 2-team conference with Florida and Kentucky just waiting to beat up on each other. So that's the highs and lows of the conference. I think the top half of the conferences you have to really look at as your majority of your teams that are going to make it into the Final Four or into the final tournament at the NC2A tournament. And that's what I'm watching for, to see how that's going to work out. But I think you've got 6. The one I don't know about is the Pac-12. You know, SC has lost 3 matches, 2-3. They're 4-5. They could be what, 7-2. They could be.
We don't have to play the could be game because I think every team can probably go through that, right? I mean,
but that would give them 7 teams in that conference out of 12. That makes it interesting.
Maybe, but I would actually go out and say that I think the ACC is stronger up top than the Pac-12. Because when you look at the top 3 teams of the Pac-12 and you look at Washington and Stanford and Utah, and maybe you throw in Oregon in there, I wouldn't put UCLA or Colorado up there in the heavyweight section. And you put them against Louisville and Pittsburgh. And, who do I want to put as that third ACC team? Maybe Georgia Tech, right? I'm thinking there's a couple good ones. I would probably rather have the 3 ACC teams than the 3 Pac-12 teams, but I'd still probably rather have the 2 Big 12 teams, Texas and Baylor. That's where it's tough. But the third Big 12 team isn't even remotely in that top 30 discussion in my mind. Is it West Virginia? Maybe. It's probably West Virginia. So that's where it's like they drop way off my mountain.
And then let's throw in that Wisconsin lost their middle blocker Hart.
Yeah, we didn't mention that yet. Danielle Hart, torn ACL, unfortunately. So they're probably going to go with Smeck.
Well, they're going to go with the 6'9" Canadian. They're going to take the red shirt off of the 6'9" Canadian. And is she fast enough as a youngster coming in, or is that going to change the top of the Big Ten? Are you going to have Wisconsin being not as good? Are you going to have Minnesota being a little bit better? Is Nebraska going to start playing the people we think they should be starting?
Sun and Kubik didn't get starts in Maples, and then they both only played front rotation at home. And you know what? I don't mind it, right? I talked to Don Shaw a little bit about how he used to do things when he was at Stanford. And he said every non-conference match, he would just rotate every set a different starting lineup. So if John Cook wants to play around there, he has the wherewithal and he has a little bit of credibility, right? It doesn't really matter when you look at the grand scheme of things. If you go through the Big Ten and you have a good season, you're making the tournament. If you go through the Big Ten and you have a great season, you're going to host the regional anyways, regardless of how you play here in this non-conference action if you're a Husker fan.
As long as he doesn't lose to Omaha, which he was behind at and had to come back to win 3-2 and then go to Creighton, he has to win that match. Then he can play around. And they blew him out.
And luckily they blew out Creighton. Yeah, you mentioned that. I don't know. You got to keep an eye on Ohio State always. I think Penn State will compete. I may be a little biased from my years in the Big Ten, but I still think it's the best conference, top to bottom. You mentioned 6. Even if you throw 6 teams out there, Michigan on that fringe, what if Maryland shows up? I'm going Big Ten in terms of the best.
What ifs. You said no what ifs here.
What did I say? What if Maryland shows up? Yeah. Well, I don't think Maryland. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens with Maryland. But yes, I'm still putting up. If you're going to go 6 against 6, it's still Pac-12 and Big Ten over everyone else. But if you're going to go and grab the top 3, I like the ACC. I love the way Louisville, they're playing like they're expecting to beat everyone right now. I just wish there was a Texas-Louisville battle. We didn't spend too much time talking Texas. They won a 4-setter against A&M. So they keep looking good, but not phenomenal. They're not sweeping everyone. So that's something to keep an eye on here.
And we've got 5 conferences, the 5 Power 5 conferences. The top 2 teams are really good, but they're only going to be 8 seeds, and 2 are going to get put someplace else. And you don't want to be playing those 2. So
there's only going to be 4 seeds, you mean?
Well, really? It's going to be very interesting where the teams are placed on the brackets in the tournament. And that's what everybody should be fighting for, because you don't want to be out of that top 8.
And you don't want to go to Gregory. You don't want to go to the UW Fieldhouse. It is so vital for that 3, 4, 5. I mean, we can pretty much pencil in, right, Texas and Wisconsin to get a seed. That's in my opinion, unless obviously the Badgers fall deeply without that middle 2. It's just that fight for 3 and 4. And is it going to be the fight between Pitt, Louisville, and Ohio State, or will things happen in conference play? That's the beauty of not knowing. Let's wrap this up with our marquee matches, though, Mick. Walk me through a couple big ones. We teased Rice in Texas. You've seen a lot of Nicole Lennon. You've obviously watched a lot of Longhorn matchups. Do you see this one being close? It's, the Owls are a team that for some reason always give fits down in Austin.
If Texas doesn't take Rice seriously this 3rd year, they will.
Well, then what are they doing if they're not, right? If they're not taking him seriously, they just lost to him, right?
Well, it's just amazing to me how Rice seems to lull them to sleep and then come back in these matches and beat Texas in 5. You know what the score was last spring? Texas had a 12 9 lead in the 5th set and never scored again. And Rice won 15-12 in the 5th. And that was at Texas. So, and I was there. I got a chance to watch that and just was shaking my head.
So this one's at Rice. Is there anything tonight, Tuesday night? I know there were a couple
I'll
5
give you,
matchups. Give me
I'll
a
give
little
you
bit.
my choices for good matches on Tuesday night. If you can tune in, catch the Air Force versus New Mexico match. That in their conference is a big deal. And there's a good rivalry match that's really fun. Montana versus Montana State. And that's for all of Montana. I mean, they will be fired up.
Montana State just nearly beat Washington in 5 the other day.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's going to be a big one. And Wednesday night, you mentioned Texas Rice. Well, I like Utah, Washington also. And another Pac-12 game to go along with that, USC and UCLA. That will be big time, no matter what their records are. When those two get together, it's war. And then finally, you can't count out Colorado undefeated against Washington State. So that's big. And the last one is Ole Miss is playing at 11-0 against an Auburn team that we need to find out if that's a real team or they just scheduled well. So that match, along with an ACC match that I think might be interesting, Syracuse has gone under the radar. Leonard Yellen out there has gotten a really good bunch of players be playing up there for a long time. And he's up against Boston College, who was 10-1 going into the weekend, traveled to Michigan to play in the swimming pool there and lost 3 times. So they're now 10-4. So that will be a great match. And then Thursday night, here's a good one. Mississippi State versus Florida, SEC, another Pac-12 rivalry. Always a good rivalry to watch. Arizona versus Arizona State. One I think is interesting. Boise will get challenged now by Colorado State in the Mountain West. And then here's a good matchup in state of Michigan. Western Michigan versus Eastern Michigan. And Eastern Michigan just beat Boston College 3-0 this weekend. So there, and Western Michigan's beating a lot of teams. So that's a battle for Michigan. I'm not leaving out Central, but they're just not playing this weekend. So
there we go. Yeah, I got a good buddy, Tyler, who's an assistant coach over at EMU. So wishing him a little bit of luck. I also love St. Mary's at San Diego on Thursday. I've seen St. Mary's. They've got Ellen Ibaka out on the left side. They can be dangerous. Chandler Cowell as well. San Diego seems to be in that territory where they're either incredible or very vulnerable on a match-to-match basis. And then, of course, we've got to mention, right, Nebraska Northwestern on Wednesday. Who knows which Husker team is going to come out? Temi Thomas Ilara on any given night. That's kind of just the way I like to think of it. TTA on any night, it doesn't matter. I mean, yeah, what, Nebraska in 3, we think?
Nebraska's going to win in 3. No question.
All right, well, let's wrap up on that one. We're excited for it. Keep an eye out, though. Thursday or Friday, we may have a bonus episode for you with some interviews, with a little bit of weekend previewing coming ahead. So a little bit of that as we are excited to jump into the 10-week war that is conference play. He's Mick Haley. I'm Daniel Gillman, and this is 6 Rotations.